Welcome into Owned Media Live. My name is Erin Trafford. I am a communications and media consultant in Canada. I'm also the CEO at Story Studio Network, where we essentially act as newsrooms for brands. It's a brand new way of looking at corporate communications. It's a brand new way of looking at media. And we're pretty excited about what we've been able to build over at SSN over the last 3 years. And one of the key reasons why I'm doing this live series is because really our passion is just to educate the market about where we think the puck is going, right? To use that Wayne Gretzky kind of analogy. Media is moving so rapidly that it really is critical that you have someone in your corner who can see around the corners. And that's really what we specialize in at SSN. So we work in podcasting. We absolutely consult on broadcasting. We are all fundamentally storytellers on the team, whether we're producers, editors, strategists. It all comes from a story-based and audience-based lens. And when you put all of that together in a pot, that's where you get owned media. So over the next few weeks, I think I've planned 6 weeks out, and this is week number 2. It may extend beyond 6 weeks if we're having fun, and I don't see why not. But we're going to be doing these lives weekly around this time to dig in on some of these changes and these critical questions that you, as a professional corporate communicator, can and should be asking of yourself, of your team, of your C-suite, of your stakeholders, of your board, all of those things. So we're really going to dig in. But before we get to all of that, I have 3 things to remind you about. The first 2 are what we're calling our rapid resources. And I expect to have a third on that list within the next couple of weeks. But right now we have 2 for you. And rapid resources, this is essentially what they are. They're kind of the quick and dirties that we've put together as PDF or Word documents that will help you solve a very specific problem, challenge, brainstorm in 60 minutes or less. So they're our gift to you to help you, again, just get through and get started. So the first one is for you if you are hosting roundtables, if you have your own branded podcast, if just want to be a better conversationalist and start to really understand the power of story. We've put together a list of 60, I think it's like 63 unexpected questions that you can start asking that will help you formulate better narratives. So there should be a link depending on where you're watching this live. If it's on LinkedIn, it will be in the event description. If it's on YouTube, it's in the description box. If it's elsewhere, it's wherever the things are. But there is a link to download that interview guide. The other one is what we're calling our Start Anywhere New Media Strategy. And it is a quick read. It's a 3-pager, and it is designed as a thought experiment to help you see the differences that have very quickly emerged in audience behavior between mainstream media and what we're calling new and owned media. So it is not prescriptive. Don't download it expecting that I'm going to be able to tell you exactly what to do in a 2.5-page document, but it really is designed to help you look at your communications through, are we really stuck in old thinking? And where on this map can we maybe insert ourselves and try to pull that thread through to the way new audiences are receiving and expecting to receive communications and information? So we've called that the Start Anywhere New Media Strategy Plan. There's also a link in the places where the links are if you want to get that one. If you don't want either of those, that's okay. Just keep coming to the lives or join just my newsletter list. That would be great. Okay, so that's the housekeeping. And heads up that next week we'll be back on our Tuesday slot, 9 a.m. I already know what I'm going to talk about, so I'll tell you that at the end of today. So we set up today really as this invitation to start anywhere. And I want to unpack that with you a little bit. There are 2 key points that I want to cover. Number 1, we're just going to dive right in here, folks. And if you have questions, Drop me a comment. Let me know where you're sipping your coffee from. Are you ecstatic that the children are back at school? Mine go back tomorrow and I can't wait. And feel free to, stop me. I can see your comments. Good morning, Anisha. I'm so glad to have you here. And we'll do all this together. Okay, so there are two key points that I want to kind of unpack this morning with you that will be critical to your understanding of where to start. Okay, where to start. So the first point, and we're going to dig in on both. The first is that we need to break our thinking in terms of communications to look at new media and owned media as a circle. Okay. Some, like myself and my team, will reinforce this for me. Some might even say that we need to start thinking about it as a spiral. We need to start thinking about it spiralically. I don't know if that's actually a word. I just made that word up. Okay, so that's the first point. We're going to dig in on that. And then the second one is, and I know you've heard this because you are a professional, you are a communicator, you're invested in messaging and branding and all of those things. And you have heard us say this over and over and over and over again. It's about show, not tell, right? Show and tell, those two things. I am going to invite you to add two more words to that list. And those two words are what will pull you from old media legacy thinking into new media, owned media thinking. Okay. So today is really about an invitation, more thought experiments than anything, but really critical as you start to consider how and where you're going to use new media. Okay. So I spoke last week. If you caught last week's live, I spoke last week about campaign being the C word in terms of owned media, because what campaign thinking does is it forces you to think really linearly, right? You're looking at, typically it's a 3-month period, maybe it's a 6-week period, but you're thinking about it as having a beginning and an end. There is a discernible, measurable amount of time that typically looks like a Gantt chart or a timeline, right? We all use them, no matter what tool you're using. Okay. And it's really funny because after the fact, Kim Rossi, who I don't know if she's here right now, but she commented on that video and said, especially for not-for-profits, campaign thinking is great in terms of planning, which I agree with, but it can really force you to inadvertently be too insular in your thinking. It can make you look too much at yourself and not enough outwardly. So here's my invitation to you. When we talk about a circle, what we need to do to get into that circular frame of mind is break our linear thinking. And traditionally, I don't know about you, but when we were in grade school and you were taught to look at the calendar, it was always 12 pages. It was always just a line, right? We are taught to think about calendars and weeks and days in a linear fashion. So this might be a bit of a challenge for you. And that's how our budgets are set, especially for not-for-profits, right? You hear this all the time. We need to spend this budget line by this date or it evaporates. And even I think physiologically, we're conditioned, right? The kids are back to school this week. Mentally, there's a cliff in September. Mentally, we have a cliff in December, right? And that's just the way we're programmed. So some of this is breaking that programming in order to unlock value that we're accidentally leaving on the table. And again, I'm not saying that like looking at a calendar and plotting your time is a bad thing. It is not. But if that's the only way you're thinking about it, you aren't fully leveraging the power and the value in your brand and your story, because value will leak out the edges of that linear thinking. Now, when we look at campaigns instead of flat, instead of on a monthly calendar, and instead envision them on a circle that is 3-dimensional, so actually spheric, right? That's where we get the spiral. You start to be able to see and capture all the value in your story. So owning your media is squeezing the value from your brand. And think about it this way. All of a sudden, you're not looking at linear points in time. And instead, you're looking at both length and depth. Any audience member can join you at any point in that sphere, and you're able to serve them something of value to them, right? You're not waiting for people to catch up to you. You're not communicating down for people who are further ahead. You have content and storytelling that matches where everybody is in that sphere. And I know that's a bit esoteric and it's a little bit heady, but it's super, super critical to start that mind exercise, because otherwise you're never going to get it. You're always going to feel stuck. There's always going to be a frustration point. You need to really break your thinking about media, period, if you're going to jump into owned media. I'm going to write more about this in my Saturday newsletter. So make sure you subscribe or download one of those rapid resources to get on our list. And I'm happy to go back and forth with you on email or whatever once you've read more about that. Okay. So that's number one, is break your linear thinking even a little bit and start to think about it as a spiral, as a sphere, as a circle. You're never late. You're never on time. You always have something for everyone. That is the crux of owned. And this is also what makes it really challenging, right? That's why not everybody can do it really well. Number two, I said I was going to give you two more phrases to add to the concept of show, don't tell. So show and tell. This is where we really start to unpack our thinking about being audience first. And I grew up in traditional legacy media. I grew up in it. So this was a hard one for me to wrap my head around and truly be able to articulate. But in owned media and in new media, there is a particularly different emphasis on audience. Audience has always been important. The value has always been in the audience, right? You know the saying, if you're on a platform that's free, you are the product, right? The audience has always been critical to media revenue and success. You can never forget about the audience, but in new media, we need to take that one step further. Okay. This is where I'm going to add to the list. So get out your notepad or pause this video. We used to say, show, don't tell. Show me your value, right? Show me what you've done. Show me who you are. Show me what you stand for. Don't just tell me. Don't preach to me. Don't just broadcast to me. Show me. Hugely valuable. Don't stop doing that. But if you jump into new and owned media, there are two more things you need to add to that list. Okay. We've got show, we've got tell, and now we have involve and invite. So if you're thinking about your communication on a sphere, you are on a spiral staircase and not a line. Your communications needs to be constantly showing, telling, involving your audience, and inviting them to either go further up that staircase with you or further down that staircase with you. One or the other. Or both, right? You can get them to go up and down, so long as they're still in your sphere. You might have heard that recently Google did a research study. It was released in the last 6 months, okay? And you can Google this. You can Google Google's research study, okay? They came out with what is called the 11-7-4 rule. Essentially, they went and studied all the things and came back and determined that in order for a conversion to take place, a single individual needs to spend 11 hours with you across 7 different touch points on 4 different platforms. If you don't have a spiral of content, if you're not creating a sphere and all you're doing is creating a line, you're never going to juice that 11 hours out of one person. Or you are, but it's going to take you a really long time. A really long time. So are you seeing how I'm pulling all of this picture together? So the circle starts to make sense. You need to give them an ecosystem. You need to invite them and involve them so that they can continue to go deeper with you and you can hit those conversion metrics. So 11 hours of content. Does that make your head hurt? It might. It might. Sit there and just think, have we put out 11 hours of content? Have we actually done that? Do we have that? If I was going to put a stakeholder or whoever I needed, a potential client, 11 hours? This is why at Story Studio Network, we start with podcasts, because it is actually the easiest way to develop enough foundational content to hit that 11-hour metric. Typically, our projects, our clients who we work with will hit that metric of 11 hours, give or take, with about 2 seasons worth of shows. This is also why we don't time bound those shows. We make sure they are mostly evergreen and mostly infinitely valuable for at least 3 years out. We work very hard with our clients to ensure that that foundational content asset can help them hit that 11 hours for a very long time. And this is entirely new thinking, because the old legacy way of thinking is you're thinking every 5 minutes. You're thinking every 11 seconds. You're recreating the wheel. That's not what we do with new and owned media anymore. We have a different set of parameters because we're getting our audience to do different things with us, not for us. Okay. So you need to be creating depth. So that's the 11 hours. You can do it with video. It's a lot more expensive. It's a lot more challenging. This is why we start with audio. It's truly the easiest way to hit that metric. And then we build out from there. Now, it's also a great way to explain, because don't forget, I'm not poo-pooing the show don't tell. I think that's critical, but we need to create more of an environment of invite and involve. So this is where we get that 7 key pieces of interaction, right? You have the 11 hours of content. You have the 7 key pieces of interaction. Think about this. If someone is willing to click through your brand communication or join you for a day-long event or come to one of your panel conversations or watch your LinkedIn Live or whatever it is, you also need to be able to do that for them at least 7 times. So all of a sudden you see the burn on content and why it's really, really challenging. You need to have a plan. You can't just go willy-nilly out and do it and expect things to come together and gel. The last metric is 11, 7, 4. 4 platforms. And you might be sitting there thinking, oh God, Erin, like, what are you telling me to do? So here, I'm just going to break it down for you. And I'm very conscious of the time. I'm only going to go for a few more minutes. But so at Story Studio Network, I already mentioned, we focus on brand podcasts. We focus on the podcast because that is the fastest route to generating the 11 hours of content. It's very high lift at the start. I'm not going to lie to you. It's high lift, but we build all the strategy at the top end, right? Because then it's very low lift after that. It's also why we focus again on branded podcasts that are more evergreen. So that 11 hours of content needs to be abundantly true for the longest period of time. Then we look at blogs and newsletters. Okay, so you got the podcast. That's one of the 4 platforms. We look to blogs and newsletters. These things are part of the invitation in your strategy. You're inviting your listener, reader, audience to go further with you. Your blogs should not parrot exactly your podcast. And I know there's a lot of podcast gurus and armchair gurus out there who are saying, just take your transcript and throw it up on your website. Do that, but that is not an invitation. You are not enriching your audience's sphere. You are not inviting them up the spiral or down the spiral with you by doing that. You need your blog or your newsletter to expand, to invite them to go deeper, to invite them to a more elevated conversation about such and such a topic. That's how we use that second platform. So it can be a blog, it can be a newsletter, some form of written, researched content. That's what I use my newsletter for. You're not going to get a reproduction of this in my newsletter. I'll link to it so you can watch it again, but you're going to get something different when you're on our newsletter list. Okay. So those are those 2 touch points. Now, the next one would be, and you can do a blog and a newsletter, and then you'd have 3, right? Like this isn't an exact science, but I'm trying to invite you into a different way of thinking about it. So then let's look at that 4th platform. For lots of creators and small businesses, not-for-profits, this could be a YouTube channel, which is building a brand presence. It's a great idea. It's a searchable platform. It can be formulaic in terms of how you do it and how you approach it. That would be great. Okay. So if you're a small business and you want this cut and paste plan, start with your podcast, build out a blog and a newsletter, and then get onto YouTube. There you've hit your 4. Okay. And then aim for that 11 hours of content and 7 invitations. And all of a sudden, beautiful new media ecosystem. But what if you're a big organization? What if you are a corporate entity? What if you're doing sector-based communications like the clients that we tend to work with at Story Studio Network? YouTube isn't always the best first option to fill that 4th platform. It's just not tenable. You have too many moving pieces. Your stories are too complex. You have many cooks in the kitchen. It's just too complex. Okay. And we've experienced this. Oh, I can tell you with absolute certainty that the YouTube channel is not always the best thing for that level of comms. So what do you do? What do you do? And I see Alan Dale is here and he has the answer. I know he does because the answer is that 4th platform can be in person. Your interactions in person, your AGMs, your conference events, your conventions, your closed door roundtables, your expert panels, all of those things where you are creating a touch point that invites you going up the spiral or down the spiral. Okay. You can enlighten, you can deepen, you can invigorate, you can promote your podcast at these events. You can write follow-up blog posts about those events. You can promote them on your new. All of a sudden, I didn't even finish that sentence. I got so excited. All of a sudden, you have a spiral. Everything connects to everything else. It is not linear. And guess what? Next year, you can refer back. You can refer back. And that's what I mean by breaking your linear thinking. If all you're thinking about is the next 3 months and the next 6 weeks, you're not squeezing all the juice from your lemon. And that's a terrible thing. You need to start thinking long term. You can act short term, but you need to start thinking, how is this going to come back? How am I going to continuously create value for my media and comms? Okay. So we love when that last 4th platform is not, in fact, digital. It mitigates a lot of risk too, because we know digital platforms, they can, you can lose control of them pretty quickly. I mean, just last week with my LinkedIn Live not working properly, that was out of my control, right? So I'd caution you, if you are at that level, at having a 100% fully digital comm stack. Think about that 4th as truly an exclusive invitation to something human, something that brings you into closer proximity to that audience. Okay. You'll notice just before we close that there is one element that I did not touch on here. And, 3 points if you can get it, because I did not talk about one of those platforms being social media. I am just making the general assumption that you are leveraging social media and you are acting socially on social media. Do not build on rented land. Leverage it. Absolutely leverage it. Learn about it. Have fun with it. Be authentic on it. Use it to distribute your content and to engage with your audience. But it is not a fundamental building block of your owned and new media strategy. I would recommend against it. I'm assuming you're smart enough to use it, but it is not. Anisha's like, TikTok? If you read my newsletter yesterday, I made a funny reference about TikTok. No, use TikTok, but don't just be TikTok, right? You are a stronger communicator than that. You are a stronger communicator than that. Okay, so that's it for me. I've got to hop into a team meeting. We've got a really busy day today at Story Studio Network. I appreciate you all absolutely for spending this time with me. Like, you don't know how much it means to me that you're all here. And I will just remind you, if you want to jump on my newsletter list, drop me a comment. If you're not on it, pop me a DM and I'll get you the link, or I'll send me your email and I'll sign you up. We've got those 2 rapid resources right now, the interview template and the Start Anywhere thought experiment. So feel free to avail yourself of those. I will be back next week, I believe Tuesday at 9 a.m. Eastern. And what I want to talk about with you then is how to talk to your C-suite or your board about investing in new media. So we're going to get into the ROI conversation and how you can start to frame it up. Because if you're really lit up about this, and a lot of people get really lit up about this, your biggest block is going to be convincing your board to jump on board. And I've seen it happen. So we're going to talk about all of that next week. I invite you to join me then. I'll send more details in my newsletter. I'll also post a new event on LinkedIn. Thanks so much, guys. Have an excellent day. I hope to see you all in the comments later on. Bye.